They said the barn door had slammed shut before dawn, long before the village stirred, long before anyone dared ask why a young woman was dragged there in silence, her wrists shaking, her face streaked with dirt and something darker. She did not plead. She did not scream. She only looked back once, with a calmness so unsettling that even the guard fastening the iron lock hesitated. By midday, rumors were already crawling through the cold fields, whispers that the lord of the manor wanted her gone, erased, forgotten. But people never forget what they fear, because months later, when she returned, walking through the same fields barefoot, bruised, and unannounced, the proudest knight in the province, a man unshaken by bloodshed and battle, flinched at the sight of her, not because she was a ghost, but because she knew something he had buried with the same desperation that locked that barn door. And this is the story of how a single woman's return unraveled a noble house built on lies, ambition, and the kind of betrayal that stains generations. Before we begin this forgotten chapter of medieval history, filled with power, guilt, and the consequences no one escaped, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the stories that history tried to silence. The winter that year had a bitterness people remembered for decades, cold that carved into bone, frost that clung to window panes like claw marks. But no one remembered it more sharply than those who lived on the lands of Lord Aldrin of Harrowfell, a man whose reputation for justice was spoken of proudly, though only from a distance. Up close, justice often meant obedience, and obedience meant silence. The girl he ordered locked in the barn, Elara, had once been the quiet shadow in his household, barefoot most days, helping the steward's wife grind herbs or clean the stone floors. She moved with a kind of watchful gentleness. She belonged nowhere and everywhere, drifting through the manor like someone afraid to be seen, yet desperate not to disappear. The villagers often wondered who she truly belonged to, but the manor had a talent for burying inconvenient truths. What none of them knew, not then, was that Elara had grown up inside those walls, not hired into them. She was the late Lady Serene's niece, taken in as a child after her parents fell to plague, but a ward in title meant little in practice. After the lady's death, Aldrin had quietly stripped Elara of every privilege, reducing her to a servant whose bloodline they simply refused to acknowledge. Still, even Aldrin never meant to have her dragged to that barn. The order was given in haste, fearfully, and issued not by the Lord himself, but by his son, Sir Rowan of Harrowfell, the knight whose name once traveled through provinces like wildfire. Rowan, the man who held his father's lands as fiercely as he held his pride. Rowan, who rode into skirmishes with unflinching certainty, yet grew pale the morning Elara vanished from the manor's inner chambers. He had been seen visiting her quarters late the night before. Some said he argued. Others claimed they heard muffled cries. No one dared confirm any version, but by dawn, Rowan had summoned 2 men from the guard and given the order without explanation. Take her to the barn and lock it. No one opens it unless I speak. Those who witnessed it never forgot how Elara walked. Not dragged, walked, quiet, composed, bare feet in the frost, hands bound loosely, as if the men feared gripping her too tightly. And then she was gone. The barn sealed. Rowan returned to the manor with the look of a man who had stepped into a noose of his own making. For 3 days, no sounds came from the barn. Not pleading, not weeping, nothing. By the time Rowan finally approached the door with the guards behind him, the lock hung broken, frostbite white, where metal had split. The barn was empty, no signs of struggle, no footprints in the snow, no body. Elara was simply gone. Rumors turned to unease to fear, not supernatural fear. No one believed in ghosts here, but the harsher, more human kind. The fear that someone knew too much, that something forbidden had slipped through Harrowfell's iron grip. Rowan said nothing. Aldrin demanded silence. The servants obeyed. Because in places like Harrowfell, speaking too loudly about certain truths was more dangerous than the truths themselves. Months passed. Winter thawed into a muddy spring, then into a warm, suspiciously quiet summer. No sign of Elara returned to the manor. Rowan resumed his duties. The village pretended to forget. By autumn, most hoped she had fled far from Harrowfell, perhaps to the southern port, perhaps to a distant cloister, anywhere but here. But the truth never disappears. It waits. The day she returned, the air was hot enough to make the stone walls sweat. Merchants filled the square, and Rowan, a man who feared no battlefield, was dismounting near the chapel when he froze mid-step. His hands slipped from the reins. His eyes widened, not in shock, but recognition, because walking across the square, barefoot and thin, her hair unbound and wind-tangled, was Elara, the same linen dress, the same steady, unsettling calm. But her wrists bore rope burns that had healed, reopened, and healed again. Her eyes, once soft, now held something with edges sharp enough to cut through armor. People stopped, voices quieted. Even the baker's bell faltered mid-ring. Rowan opened his mouth, but no words left him. Elara did not look at him. She did not look at anyone. She simply walked toward the manor gate as if she had been gone for an hour, not a season. But the real shock came not from her return. It came from what she carried. In her hand was a torn scrap of parchment, creased, dirt-stained, but unmistakably bearing the black falcon seal of House Harrowfell. Rowan recognized it instantly, because he was the one who had signed it. His name, his wax seal, his handwriting, a message he had sent months earlier to someone no one in the manor knew existed, someone who should never have received it. And Elara did not just carry it. She held it where everyone could see. Before Rowan could reach her, she raised her voice with quiet certainty, just loud enough for the gathered villagers to hear. Ask him why he wrote this. Ask him whom he wanted me delivered to. The square fell into a suffocating silence. Rowan's face drained of color. And then Elara added, with a calmness that cut deeper than any blade, ask him why he thought I would not return. And with that single sentence, everything Rowan had buried began to crawl back to the surface. Rowan's throat felt as if someone had pressed a gauntleted hand around it. He stepped forward instinctively, but Elara did not flinch, nor did she offer him even a flicker of acknowledgement. The villagers, usually so cautious near the Lord's son, parted in silence, but not for him, for her, the girl who had vanished into a barn and reappeared months later, carrying a truth no one had asked for, yet everyone suddenly needed to hear. Rowan's palm brushed the edge of his sword hilt, not to draw, but to steady himself. The parchment in her hand was unmistakable. He knew the message by memory. It had been written in the panic of a single night, under candlelight, after a discovery he had prayed would never be made. "Elara," he managed, voice low and hoarse, "come inside. This is not—" She did not stop walking. Her bare feet pressed into the dust, slow and deliberate. The manor's iron gate loomed ahead of her, yet she walked as though she had already passed through it, as though nothing there held any power over her anymore. Behind Rowan, the steward whispered urgently to a guard. Lord Aldrin was already on his way. One could hear the hurried footsteps within the courtyard. Rowan knew his father's temper. He knew what this public humiliation would mean. But Elara didn't even look at the growing crowd. Her voice remained calm, too calm. "If you open the gate for me, I will walk in myself. If you refuse," she said, lifting the parchment slightly, "I will read this aloud." A ripple passed through the square. People leaned closer. Even the guards hesitated. Rowan stepped closer. "Elara, you don't know what you're holding." She turned her head, just slightly. Her eyes met his with a quiet intensity that forced him to stop mid-step. "I know exactly what it is," she said, "and I know exactly who sent it." Before Rowan could answer, the manor gates swung open with a metallic groan. Lord Aldrin emerged, breath uneven, hair disheveled from haste. He stared at Elara as though she were a threat carved out of steel, not a girl he had once sworn to protect. "Elara," Aldrin said sharply, "this display ends now." But she did not bow. She did not lower her eyes. She simply offered him the parchment. "Then explain this." Aldrin snatched the parchment and scanned it quickly, but Rowan already knew his father's lies could not save him now. The message was simple, but deadly in implication. Deliver the girl to the river outpost by dawn. No witnesses. Payment upon confirmation. Signed, Rowan of Harrowfell. It could be interpreted many ways, unless someone lived through it, unless someone survived it, unless someone returned carrying it like a blade. Aldrin's jaw tightened. "This is forged." "It is not," Elara replied instantly. "Then you misunderstand. I understood everything the day your men dragged me to that barn." Her voice grew steadier with every word. "The night Rowan visited me, he wasn't arguing. He was panicking. He thought I knew something. Something he believed I would reveal." The villagers looked to Rowan now, every gaze a tightening noose. Aldrin tried again, his voice rising. "Girl, mind your—" "I saw the ledger," she said plainly. Everything stopped, even Rowan's breath. The ledger, not a story, not a rumor. The ledger that held the truth Rowan had spent months trying to bury under bribes, forged records and silent threats. Elara continued, unmoved by their shock. "The ledger that shows where the taxes went, where the grain from the southern fields disappeared, why the villagers starved, while the manor's horses were fattened for tournaments, why Rowan's coffers grew, while Harrowfell's people grew thin." A murmur rose like a storm wind behind her. The villagers exchanged looks, some fearful, some furious. Rowan took one step forward, his voice cracking. "Elara, you don't understand the consequences of—" "I understand them better than you," she replied, "because I was the one who reorganized the records for the steward's wife. I was the one who saw the numbers that did not match." Aldrin's face darkened to a dangerous shade. That ledger was destroyed. Elara finally turned toward him fully. "No, my lord. You hid it in the old granary, behind the cracked wall, wrapped in the cloth with your wife's sigil." She paused. "You forget I grew up in that house. I know where Lady Serene kept everything she feared you would misuse. Aldrin's composure shattered. His hand shot out, grabbing her arm, but she didn't recoil. Instead, she said something that made his grip loosen instantly. I've already shown it to someone. The world seemed to tilt. The villagers gasped. Rowan felt his knees weaken. Aldrin released her, voice trembling with rage. Who did you show it to? Elara lifted her chin. The one person you swore you could control. Everyone waited. Rowan's pulse hammered like a drum against his ribs. Then Elara spoke the words that shattered the last illusion holding Harrowfell together. I gave it to your daughter. Not Rowan, not Aldrin. Their bloodline, but not their loyalty. Lady Marianne, Aldrin's only legitimate child, was as sharp-minded as she was quiet, and she hated secrets. At that moment, a new figure stepped through the manor gate, a slender silhouette wrapped in a riding cloak, dust on her boots, determination in her eyes. Marianne. She held the ledger in her hands, and she was not closing it. For a long moment, no one moved. Not Aldrin, not Rowan, not the guards who suddenly looked unsure of who they served. The square fell beneath a silence so heavy it felt like a verdict. All eyes turned toward Lady Marianne, her grip firm around the ledger, an object small in size, but powerful enough to redraw destinies. She stepped forward slowly, her expression unreadable. The villagers bowed instinctively, but she did not acknowledge the gesture. Instead, she stopped beside Elara, standing shoulder to shoulder with the girl her father had tried to erase from Harrowfell. Marianne opened the ledger deliberately, letting the pages flutter until the ink-stained columns landed beneath her gaze. These records, she said, her voice low but clear, account for 5 years of stolen grain, coin, and labor. The words struck Rowan like a whip. He had hoped, foolishly, that Marianne might side with blood. But Marianne had been raised by her mother, not her father. And Lady Serene valued truth more than lineage. Aldrin's voice cracked through the square, desperate and violent. Bring her inside this instant. This is family business. Marianne closed the ledger. It stopped being family business the moment you took from the people who relied on you to protect them. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Hands tightened on pitchforks. A few men took uncertain steps forward, anger rising now that their suffering finally had a name attached to it. Rowan, pale as bleached linen, looked between Elara and Marianne as though searching for a path out of a burning room. But there were no doors left, only consequences. Elara, he said in a strained whisper, why did you come back? You could have vanished. You could have survived? She finished, turning to him. I did, but survival without justice is just another form of captivity. Her words had weight, not loud, but devastating. Rowan shut his eyes briefly. He had not ordered her death out of cruelty, nor hatred. He had done it out of fear. Fear that she knew his part in the theft. Fear that her knowledge would destroy him. In truth, Elara had only intended to confront him with what she found. It was Rowan who turned suspicion into betrayal. Aldrin, seeing control slipping from his reach, lunged for the ledger, but Marianne stepped back swiftly, holding it out of his grasp. Touch me, she warned, and the entire province will know you raised a hand to your heir. Aldrin froze. The villagers watched the exchange with widening eyes. For years they had endured Aldrin's taxes, his punishments, his unyielding demands. But a successor who sided with them, that was a force more powerful than fear. Rowan spoke again, voice cracking. "Marian, think of what you're doing. This will destroy our name." Marian turned to him, and in her eyes was something colder than anger, disappointment. "No, Rowan, you destroyed our name." She motioned to the guards. "Detain Lord Aldrin of Harrowfell for misappropriation of royal dues and endangerment of subjects under his charge." The guards hesitated, caught between loyalty and duty. Aldrin roared, "You dare! I am your lord." Marian lifted her chin. "Not anymore." Two guards moved. Aldrin struggled, shouting every order, every threat he could summon, but the villagers watched in grim satisfaction as his wrists were bound, not tightly, but firmly enough to signal an end. Rowan took a step back, shaking. No, this isn't right. Alara, tell them I never meant to hurt you. Tell them I tried." "You tried to silence me," she said softly, "and you almost succeeded." Her calmness cut deeper than a blade. Rowan dropped to his knees as though the weight of his own guilt had collapsed his legs. The proudest knight in the province, brought down not by sword or enemy, but by the truth he failed to bury. Marianne approached him. "You are my brother. I will not see you harmed, but you will answer for everything you've done. The court will decide your fate." Rowan looked up at her with hollow disbelief. "Sister, please." But Marianne's face did not soften. Justice, once awakened, is not easily lulled back to sleep. Then she turned to Alara. "You have the right to speak before the council when they arrive. I will ensure your protection until then." Alara nodded faintly, but her face showed no triumph, only exhaustion, and a quiet grief for a family that had once been hers. The villagers began to disperse slowly, whispering of change, of justice, of how history would remember this day. The manor gates remained wide open now, symbolically, deliberately, no longer a fortress of secrecy, but an estate under judgment. But just as Marianne handed the ledger to one of the guards for safekeeping, a stable boy came running from the road, breathless, wide-eyed. "Milady, riders from the capital. They bear the king's crest. They say they've come with orders regarding Harrowfell." Marianne stiffened. Aldrin turned pale. Rowan's eyes widened again in panic. Alara felt her heartbeat spike. For a moment, the entire square froze. Then the boy added the final sentence, one that changed everything once more. "They say." The king already knew about the ledger, and the implications were clear. Someone had reached him before Alara returned. Someone had spoken. Someone inside Harrowfell had been watching all along. No one knew who, but the riders were nearing the gate, and the truth, whatever shape it took next, was about to arrive. Power can hide the truth for a time, but never forever. Whether in kingdoms or in ordinary lives, what's buried eventually fights its way to the surface, and those who stand with integrity walk stronger than those who rule by fear. If you want more stories of forgotten justice, untold betrayals, and the people who reshaped history in silence, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss the next story that time tried to erase.